AI channel, the ability to backtest, the ability to welcome all. I'm going to remind everyone that we're going to record this and have the recording up later. Newest webinar on that playlist. It'll be the office hours. Stay tuned for the replay recording.
So Scott was commenting on the oil price. Okay, yeah, we'll take a look at some of those charts here in just a minute. So welcome everyone to the April 20 office hours. I'm Jamie Hodge. You got Steve Gomez riding shotgun. Big crowd in here. The crowds just keep getting bigger, and that's a good thing. Yeah, so welcome all the newcomers as well. Before we get rolling here, just want to take a minute we're all big boys and girls here, presenting all of the information in this webinar or any of the other webinars that are coming at you every week, especially if the trading room is worth its salt, which ours very much is. Barry does a fantastic job getting in there, and they're like, sign me up. I'll sign up just for the trading room alone, not to mention we've got this one-of-a-kind scanner as well. So that's what's going on with the trading room. You get myself and Steve on the 5 p.m. slot for Monday. Steve's going to take the steering wheel, hosted by our CEO and founder, Mr. Dan Merkin, along with our Chief Technical Officer, Brad Williams, always entertaining with those two. Andy's going to round out the 5 p.m. Eastern slots on Thursdays with the Trading Studio, and I ride shotgun with him. So we're hosting these on YouTube now. So we allocate that hour for anything TI related. We've done a lot of tweaking and recalibrating of those AI modules to meet current market conditions. So the bottom line is people are responding, people are liking the AI. It's a one-of-a-kind product bringing you statistically weighted entries on an intraday basis. It's going to be ready, but if you're like me, you're just kind of waiting with bated breath, chomping at the bit, waiting to get in there and see what it's going to be like using Brokerage Plus in a $0 commission environment. But I'm getting a little off topic here. You can see the orange bars here are demo orders through, well, this is probably off a little bit because we've got our own paper trading mode now. But the bottom line is these blue bars are actual live orders being sent through to interactive brokers through our Brokerage Plus module, okay? And it could be in keeping with tradition, we always like to talk about the market recap. That's Steve's area of expertise. So Steve, if you're ready, I'm gonna kick it over.
See these attendance numbers. It's just a testament market. So great place to show up, tune in. Just a reminder, webinars all week, YouTube channels. Lows are not an event, but they are rather a process. And by a process, we're meaning the people that aren't really convinced that that was the place to buy, they've jumped back in here. Handle. But we have reversed on Monday. Today we had a pretty weak close. We'll talk about that 50 period. My favorite 10-period moving average. So really, this is what I'm going to be focusing on here in the next day. Probably it's going to resolve itself here in the next day or two. I mean, I think that's probably part of my problem. So as to why mine frees up. There we go. All the cues. As in the more financial. Let's see what second is, kind of peek their head above and seemingly healthy. That will, and in terms of technical analysis, to have that process event. And so when I heard that, oh geez, okay, I respect the guy too. Maybe we are going to have a process event. And if you think about it, it's not always that easy to just turn on a dime. You still have people that have not been convinced. We'll test and we will pass. And maybe roll back over with it's COVID related. These lows can pour through. Are we going to respect back down into these moving it down here? That's free space 10 ready to cross above the 50. That's the reason that I said on the regular stuff, pretty much all the charts look like that. I want to see things higher. A nice American silver airspace here as well. Hopefully we'll see some fall. I'm not sure. I think they're in the
back here. Okay, and as Steve is pointing out on the and how my compare count window, great read here. Now I have thrown in a little in this one and behind them. So if we take a peek at the red data side, you can large blocks. So a general rule of thumb, this morning, 2 hours, we just kind of melted straight up here, peaked out up here. If we use the hunting analogy as traders, we're always going out, we're looking for a specific pattern. We're looking for a specific animal. And by the way, I'm not a hunter, but the hunting analogy always seems to carry over pretty well. But right now in the market conditions that we're in, it's like, okay, it's 100 degrees one day, the next day it's below freezing. One day we're ripping up, one day we're ripping down. If the scenario that Steve plays out, that Steve was describing plays out, well, we might we might drop below freezing again pretty soon here, but you just never know. It's kind of like being in Texas right now. It's going to be 40, 50 degree temperature swings from one day to the next. So that's kind of like the market environment that we're in right now. But the bottom line is, why am I talking about this? Well, the animals in the forest would definitely be impacted by the temperature, right? Hot, cold, too hot, too cold. So a lot of the patterns that I typically look for, they just aren't that prevalent here lately due to market conditions. And we'll get into more of that here in a little bit. But overall, a pretty good read on the opening action. And that's kind of where we topped out up there all before we came back down and kind of settled into, get past Friday's low and settled into this little bottom of this green candle here back from the 14th. So it's going to be interesting moving forward, to say the least. All right, well, let's get on to the good stuff here now. So just wanted to give everybody a little history lesson on compare count windows, what I use them for, but just keep in mind, anything that you want to keep count of, you can employ a compare count window to do that. All right, so Holly, kind of being in the same boat there, if we check in on Holly over here on the toolbar, or excuse me, the channel bar, we can see 1.0, 2.0, and Holly Neo. And if we look at the trade count for today, we had a total of 13 signals, 3 from 1.0, 6 from 2.0, and 4 from Neo, bringing up the rear there. And conservative profit mode was doing pretty good today, or finished pretty good. I sure wish we could enlarge these little panels. Maybe at some point in the future we'll be able to do that. But if you check out conservative profit mode, which is what 2.0 and Neo both finished in, we can see that all modules did pretty good today. Almost got up to 500 bucks and change in conservative mode. Moderate profit, we got well above the $500 mark here, and things were looking rosy until the downturn hit and everything kind of evaporated. Aggressive, even more so, okay? So now is a good time, especially with a lot of new people in here, to quickly cover the differences between these three risk modes: conservative, moderate, and aggressive profit. Now, up here on the All Trades blotter, you'll also notice I've got these columns installed: conservative profit, moderate profit, aggressive profit over here. So first and foremost, ALC today was probably, one of the best performers from a dollar value. Only finished the day looking about 1% up, but at one point in time, this ALC trade, and by the way, all the numbers that you're seeing reflected in my trade blotter right here are based on me risking $100 per trade. And to set that up for the AI, we can always go to Tools and Options, come over here to our AI trade size. You can see right here, I've got risk-based stop of $100. And what I'm telling the system here is, doesn't matter to me what price the security is, I want to risk 100 bucks on every trade. And based on the stop loss that the system is using, it will get me in the appropriate number of shares here. So this is a great example on this ALC because the stop loss was relatively small on this one. We had a quarter right here between 52.76, which was the entry price, and the stop price of 52.51. So based on $100, that allowed me to accumulate 400 shares of ALC. If it would have stopped me out, would have been right there at about $100 loser. So this one got a very nice lift on support. Perfect little wick down on that entry signal right there. And that was pretty much the bottom. And then you can see over the next hour and change, just boom. This is what I like to call immediate gratification. Just worked immediately. Conservative, $340 even. Notice the shaded area up here and the sell arrow. That is the time spent in conservative mode. Now, when the market was trending and we were still going up, and by the way, we still see these, they're just not there a whole lot here lately. I would expect maybe we'll see some of this when we do get a good down day and the AI is loaded up pretty good short. we might see some spread develop between conservative and moderate, okay? If we look at conservative profit over here and then we look at moderate profit, most of these numbers over here in moderate are going to be smaller, because today if we took more risk, we were not rewarded, we were penalized, okay? So a lot of the times when we see the AI making an exit, we can ignore it if we like what's going on with the chart and stay in the trade in hopes for gaining more than the AI is making. You'll hear myself, Steve, Andy, Michael all say this. The AI is not the best at exits. Its strong suit are the statistical weighted entries that it brings us. And a lot of the times we can make a better exit depending on our skill level and how many hours we've got in front of the screens reading charts. But the bottom line is, if we tried to take more risk today, it did not pay off. So for example, if we would have ignored the exit signal on ALC, initially we would have made a little bit more money as it crept on up to 54 and change up here. But if we tried to hold it to the close, nope, we're back down below what the AI plucked out in conservative mode. And so brings up a good point here. Well, Jamie, what does conservative mode even mean? Probably some people out there asking that question right now. And let me quickly go over all the things that can get the AI to close a trade when we're in conservative mode here. So first and foremost, we've got a stop loss, just like you or I would do in a manual trade. We may or may not have a profit target, and we've always got a timed hold. Once again, all of these signals that are being generated through the AI are for intraday hold times, or geared around intraday hold times. And if we look down here at the strategy panel, each strategy, we can see the time stop that is, geared for that strategy. So on all support for ALC, or on support, we've got a 60-minute hold time for that specific strategy. So we got profit target, stop loss, and hold time. Now we've also got two other variables that the AI can exercise in conservative mode in the form of profit save and reduce risk, okay? So all in all, 5 things of why the trade could close in conservative mode: profit target, stop loss, timed hold, reduce risk, or profit save. All right, now in moderate mode, it's just going to keep the trade open unless the stop triggers. So we can see here on UAL, which wasn't a bad trade around, by the way, and I'll get into that in just a moment. UAL got short down here, and not too long after, took a drift up, tagged us out with the stop out. UAL hovered about, let's see here, 28.18, about a 30-40 cent range above that stop area for a while. Came back down here and revisited it. So I said this one represented a good trade around opportunity. And by the way, a trade around is something that has been brought to your attention by the AI. Maybe you were in it, maybe you weren't in it. It all kind of ties into the exit reasons over here. And over again, I like to say, yeah, sometimes the AI gives us a nice signal and it goes immediately, very similar to the ALC. Other times, we weren't in the position, or maybe we got in UAL and we got stopped out. Maybe we were not in UAL, and later down the line, we saw the stop get triggered, okay? We see the panel flash, and we're like, ooh, Holly just got stopped out of UAL. Well, it still might be worth keeping your eyes on, because, UAL gap down, we tried to put the short on, it stopped us out, and got about a little over halfway through that gap, from the prior close, and then it rolled back over. All right, so a lot of the times, once this has been brought to our attention, as I said earlier, we've got statistical probability attached to all these plays, and that statistical probability is good for the day. But just as with any trade that you or I or the AI signals or we make, sometimes the timing is just a little bit off. So in this case, we see the AI get stopped out, fill about half the gap, false gap retracement comes into place, start to head back down, get back down to that stop area, which is kind of interesting as well, because we put in the wick up here. maybe I could even take the short here and hope we get back down to the original entry line, okay? That's what we would call a trade around. Well, the timing was just a little bit off on the initial signal, but maybe a trade around to work on this one. So, you know, we could have keyed off that stop loss area once this little short-term top had been put in, and maybe taken a good trade from the stop loss area back down to the signal area. Maybe, maybe not, just depends on how the day was playing out. Another good example of a trade around in Holly today, where'd it go, nail? There we go, NAIL. Same type of action, okay? Gap down, Holly calls the short right here. What happens? Just like UAL, we grind back up here, get stopped out, covers a little bit more of that gap than UAL did, and then we cycle back down. Notice what happens right here. We hit that stop area again. We make a capitulation down to the original entry signal, and then we actually tag the entry line again and get more of a release, okay? It's what Steve likes to call the second mouse getting the cheese, right? This guy took the trade, same trade, got stopped out, thing cycles back down here, comes back through the entry line again, and then releases nicely, okay? So whether we were keying off of the stop loss area again, hoping to get back down to the entry signal, or whether we were just waiting for that second entry to occur, it would have panned out pretty good here. AI was just a little early on these short plays today. So keep that in mind as you move forward and you do interact with the AI. Sometimes the initial signals are great, other times trade arounds are presented, and it's just up to us to kind of pick and choose and see those interesting levels and leverage that information accordingly. Now, having said this, you know, in Brokerage Plus, you are able to automate Holly. And there's even an option in there to take second entries, because sometimes the second mouse gets the cheese, and we do have that automated ability functionality available in Brokerage Plus. And there's tons of other articles. I know Dave Mabe likes to talk about this frequently, one of our team members and our chief technical officer / coding guru, about how, you know, seeing things like this occur aren't necessarily bad things, because you can, you know, parlay that information and, you know, keep tabs on the next one as it's playing out in real time. So just keep that in mind. Not only are the original entry signals good, but sometimes we can use the stop areas as pivot points if the timing is just a little bit off there. So typically what I like to do is go through and check out the spread between conservative and moderate, but just due to the nature of the day, you know, Holly's P&L was affected with the overall market, just like a lot of things were out there. Everything was nice and hunky-dory up here, but if we didn't exercise a little bit of risk management and peel off profits accordingly, you know, check out what happens here on the 10 period on the SPY as well. As soon as we closed here, that's when things got weak and we took that downturn. All right, so that's about it for Holly today. Nothing to write home about, but not a bad performance considering market conditions and the fact that, you know, based on these closing numbers over here, there was a lot more on the table during the day. All right, so getting back to the things that are usually in the forest, but due to the extreme temperature fluctuations, those types of animals just aren't quite as prevalent here. So I'm going to talk about two range breaks that I saw today that look pretty decent. And this is definitely on the short side, no pun intended, because usually there's a lot more of these setups. There were hardly any on the long side today for my momentum high-low tickers. So we're going to talk about the two that were decent today and that might have a little bit more juice left in them. And then we're going to revisit the pin the 10 top list window, because I put an additional twist on that as I continue to examine that top list and play around with it. I think you guys are going to find it pretty interesting here. But real quick here, let's just talk about these two short setups. The first one was in LVS today. So keep in mind, when I'm talking about high and low momentum tickers, I'm just talking about these two guys right here. Turbo breaks down, turbo breaks up. Both of these windows can be found in channel 4. If you scroll down to the bottom of the channel bar there and you click on channel 4, you're going to get all of mine, Steve, Andy, and Sean's favorite windows of which you can find these two in there. So getting back to LVS, a little bit of gap down on LVS, a little sideways action for the first almost 2 hours there. Tighten that up there, corresponding with this opening wide range bar that turned into a wick bar. A lot of the times these can telegraph price action. We had a wick down here, snap back up here, but eventually we came right back down to where that opening wick stopped, and right about right here we had a nice clean range break. All right, as the stock is punching lows, doing massive 1 minute volume and keeping a pretty good relative volume. Let's see how. Yeah, we finished about 40% of normal on LVS today at 1.41, but you can see right here a nice clean break. I also liked it a lot because it's staying nice and below 10 periods, acting as that smashing hand, keeping it down. So a nice clean entry right here, and we always look at the prior 15-minute candle, not including the entry bar, to assess risk when things are setting up nicely on the intraday here. And once again, these are 15-minute candles. So we had a nice tight risk area up here up to the top of that prior 15-minute candle. Didn't exactly go crazy today as soon as the entry was made. A little sideways action, but then, you know, before too long, sellers came back in, chased it all the way down, finished nice and weak going into the close. What I also like about Las Vegas is, well, as Steve was talking about earlier, might be time to start putting some shorts back on. We had a nice little flat area up here, and then we broke out of that area. We also had a nice setup on the intraday, and we're quickly approaching this little area from this gap period back here from the 6th. We had a nice little gap up. So it's going to be interesting if we just kind of squeak down here tomorrow, or how many every days it might take. Once we get down to this area and get into this gap, we might get a little bit more push through. Okay, so not only was it a good performer today, but it's also a good swing trade candidate to hold overnight. Now, in these windows, you're going to notice that there is a next high or low filter in here. And by the way, by the time we're done here, I'm going to drop all the windows that I'm showcasing next into the chat area. But this one right here is a custom formula. So we can quickly look and see, okay, Las Vegas was hitting lows. How much room might we have in this position before we get to the next area that might act as some support? And this little guy is telling us what that value is, as opposed to us having to eyeball it on the chart. Now that's going to become a lot more eye-opening when we get to this top list here. So the bottom line is this. If you're going to want this custom formula for next high or low, then you're going to need to send an email in to info@trade-ideas.com. Say, hey, I need this custom formula that was in Jamie's webinar. They'll send it over to me, and I'll be happy to patch that into your back office so that you'll have it into your account. So LVS was a great low-risk setup today that might have a little bit more juice left in it for tomorrow. And the only other one that came out clean today was this VNO, Vornado Realty Trust. Of course, looking very similar to what we saw in the LVS little consolidation period. Cracking down below its 10 period on the daily too. The 20 period is coming into play here as well. So we might find some support off of that moving average tomorrow. Maybe it has a little bit more room if it decides it wants to crush through it. But needless to say, a nice clean entry right here. About, what was that, 3 hours into the open? Very low risk, all right? Look how tight it got right here in the prior 30 minutes leading up to this break right here, and some very nice follow through from 39.51 down to about 38 here towards the close, all the while not acting like it was even considering taking a stab back above that 10 period fast line there. So it'll be interesting to see if we get through this little level tomorrow. Assuming we do punch through that level, I mean, anything back over here could be fair game as far as some follow through in VNO. So as I said earlier, a lot of the things that are present are not present right now just due to market conditions. These were two of the tightest ones that I was able to identify today from my Momo tickers, and really nothing from the upside today. A few were in there, but nothing to write home about. So now we're gonna go ahead and swap right over to the pin to 10 and finding strong stocks in a market like what we're experiencing today. So initially, a couple of weeks ago, I had the original version of Pin the 10. And what I was doing was just trying to find stocks that were really kind of snuggling up to the 10 period on the daily. And I got to playing around with it. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, let's start looking at things that are considerably above the 10 period on the daily. And in this case, we're going to be looking at things that are at least 2% above the 10 period SMA on the daily. Okay. So first and foremost, I was quite shocked to see this amount of stocks on this list. Okay, and granted, compared to the whole market, it's not really that many stocks. But when it comes to finding stocks that are moving up in this type of environment, I was surprised, to say the least. Steve will recognize this symbol right here, since it was a new addition to our little fund this morning. Wasn't me. I think it was one of our other comrades that put the trade on, but it's working nicely today. Sage. When we take a look at the daily here, we can see the green line still is the 10 period, just like it is over here on the intraday, but we're looking at the daily, well above it and motoring higher. And we can see what the daily or the intraday action of Sage look like. Notice the 10 period is, it's adhering to the 10 period on the intraday as well. So we're requesting 2% above on the daily. But then what you're going to notice here is there seems to be a direct correlation between the daily and the intraday as well. Notice this column here, position in 20-day range. Notice the solid bars here. What that's indicating is that it pushed through the high of that 20-day range and is heading higher, okay? So we got Sage leading the pack up here. We got PDD showing up. We got ADVM showing up. So notice what's happening here, all right? We got 2% above, okay? So typically going kind of with the, the old analogy, things that are in motion tend to stay in motion. So what I did is I went back and I looked at things that were 1% above, and there were some good ones on there, but it seems like once we get 2% away from that moving average, things are really staying in motion here. So first and foremost, this is going to be a really good top list to monitor moving forward for things that are strong in this market environment. Then I got to thinking, well, okay, let's take it one step further here. Well, could I fold some of this into what I typically look for, whether it be a nice range break or just something that looks relatively strong, depending on when I want to get involved. The earlier we get involved, if you're making trades in the first 5 and 10 minute period, you don't have a lot to go off of unless you're watching 1 minute candles, right? But we can do a little bit of both here. So what I did is I took the filter settings that you see in here, which are relatively sparse. So we're just keying off the 10 period here, right? We're throwing in some minimum volume requirements, trying to keep the thin stuff out, minimum daily volume of 300,000 over the past 5-day average. And that's really about it. We're just using the earnings per share filter here to weed out the ETFs, and then we got a min max of 5 and 150 here. So then what I did is I transferred these filter settings into an alert window and then added one more little thing here. So we still have to be 2% above on the 10-day, and then we have to be at or above on the 15-minute intraday, keeping the same volume and price requirements, and getting some pretty good results here. So here we have the history looking about 45 minutes into the open, okay? So whether we're just monitoring this top list, which is not a bad idea, or whether we're making it a little bit more specific as we're doing in this alert window here, considering the market action that we had today, let's just scroll through a few of these and kind of check out what this thing is presenting. And what I really like about this is it makes it very simple. Is the stock staying above the 10 period on the intraday as well? Yes or no? Simple as that. So Aqua here, you can see where we got the signal at about 15 and change. Not the most massive move on the planet, but seeing it wick down here and bounce right off that 10 period, look what happened the rest of the day. Of course, a lot of these will have rolled over with the market, but getting in the money is half the battle. Once we're in the money, we have to exercise our, rule set to make sure that we don't let all of it, get away. So let's just kind of scroll through some of these. Fold, nothing to write home about here. Aqua, Texan, okay. Not a bad signal right here in TXN at, what was that, 113, towards the top of that candle there, 113.29, but we got a nice hour of push up after that. eBay, nice upward momentum in that one. Eldos, nothing to write home about, but still the trend is up. What are we noticing here? As long as that 10 period is working, these things seem to continue in an upward fashion. Here's one that didn't work. What stands out about it? Well, it was fighting this 10 period the whole time. Pins, not too bad on that one. Get the signal here, verification that the 10 period is working, and then we get a nice little pop. CGNX, same song, same dance. Good old Shake Shack, okay? Had to put an arrow on this one because obviously it was a AI trade, and the AI is hogging all the metrics over here. But not a bad little entry signal here at 43.85, and we get nice upward momentum. Now this one was just absolutely gorgeous, okay? Nice coinciding with the 45-minute opening range break right here on Abbott, all right? Quick glance over here without having to eyeball my daily chart too much, tells me, hey, Abbott's setting up right here. Ooh, it looks really good. Hey, it's got about $1.50 in it before it hits any potential resistance area. Of course, everybody knows Abbott's kind of been on fire as of late. I think they're the ones that have the alleged drug that showing good signs for the COVID, I should say. But bottom line is, look how beautiful that chart is, and some of these are going to be just beautiful. Another good one in Xilinx right here. Not a bad entry signal right there. Check out the 10 period, okay? I'm a big believer in simplicity. That's why I like the range breaks. But when you can look at something like this and just go, okay, this looks good to me. Is it above the 10 period? Yes. Okay, well, is the risk acceptable? Yes. Okay. If I'm in it, how long should I stay in it? Well, until we run into some potential, resistance on the daily, or until we get a close below the 10 period here. Okay. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward, as far as, when to start looking at these things, is the 10 period being adhered to? Is it not? Pretty simple rule set here. All right. And we could keep going through these guys, but you're just going to see more of the same. Have uncanny knack if we're getting the daily to behave. Things that are in motion tend to stay in motion. We can transfer that over to the 15-minute intraday. And if things are holding up there, that's a good sign. So we're focusing on the larger time frame, and then seeing if things hold up on the smaller time frame. And if the risk is there, these things seem to be working. So a little time check here. All right. Wow, I thought we'd have at least 15 minutes here.
No, you gotta give Anna a copy of that link too. She's looking for to the window. I'm sorry.
Yep, I'm going to drop them in right now. Now, before I drop these in, I want to say this. For the opposite side, for the downside, what you're going to do, and I was playing around with this earlier, might need a little tweaking, but take these windows and flip them, and then notice the correlation to the downside. Things that are below the 10 period, and then things that are adhering to the 10 period below on the intraday. All right. So I thought we'd have a little bit more time here, but time flies when you're having fun. So without further ado, let me go ahead and drop these in. Okay, intraday 10 alert window. And that was in real time. And make sure this is in real time as well. All right. And we'll save this one and drop it in there as well. And once again, if you do, it's not absolute, but anybody that, okay, so pin the 10. And I'll just notate 2% above. All right, so both of those windows should now be in the chat area. All right. So hopefully you guys are going to find that interesting. I'm definitely going to be paying a lot of attention to these windows and their inverses over the course of the remainder of the week. Nice, easy, simple to understand. So I want to thank you guys for popping in today. Hopefully my ramblings here made some sense. I want to thank Steve for his analysis up front. And Scott, if you're ready to walk us out here, let everybody know how they can save a little bit of money with a subscription or an upgrade. We're ready for you.
Yeah, thank you. Couple items on the way out, as usual. We've got a new ebook that has been very popular. It's all about earnings season and how to take advantage of it. Our CTO, Dave Mabe, wrote it. CIO, excuse me. Dave Mabe wrote it. He's the guy that brought us Holly and the Odds Maker and other goodies in our software. Just go to trade-ideas.com/earnings to get taken to the page where you can put in your email address and get that download. We also have a podcast. Go ahead and search for Trade Ideas Podcast wherever you listen to your pods. Add us as a subscription. Check out some of the recent ones that we released earlier this year. There's some good interviews going back also into last year. We should be getting some new ones out soon. So when you add us as a subscription, you will be prepared to get the next one popping into your player. Do that. And then we got a code, Holidays, all caps. Good for 15% off any subscription, your first month or year, or upgrade. Just use that code before the end of this month. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out. You can email us at info@trade-ideas.com. That is the best place to get help from us. Goes into the help desk software and gets routed to the appropriate team member. You can follow us on Facebook at Trade Ideas Pro. That's the handle. Share what we post with your friends. Jamie is at QuantBot on Twitter, and Steve Gomez is at Today Trader. We've also got at Trade Ideas and a few other handles that you'll find if you follow any of them. Thanks everyone for attending. We'll get the recording up later on tonight or tomorrow, and keep an eye out for that email from GoToWebinar with a link to the playlist where you can find it. All right, thanks everyone. Thanks Jamie, thanks Steve, thanks attendees. Have a good one.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks a bunch. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Wash your hands.